Hello and welcome to homework R.02. This is all about graphing. Alright, now to be able to graph, we always have to have the y by itself. So these first two questions are just kind of practicing that skill. It says write the equation of the line 4x minus 16y equals 32 in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is just kind of code for solve for y. Alright, so anytime you see get it in slope-intercept form, that tells you that you're actually solving for y. So how do we solve for y? Alright, we need to get rid of this 4x, and we need to get rid of this negative 16. Once we get rid of those two things, the y will be by itself. Alright, so we start by subtracting 4x from both sides. Minus 4x, minus 4x. These will cancel out, and we are left with negative 16y equals 32 minus 4x. Now, this is negative 16 times y, so if we want to get rid of the negative 16, we have to divide everything by negative 16. Alright, these will cancel out. We'll be left with y equals negative 2. And then on this one, if you need to use the calculator, that's fine. You would just type in negative 4 divided by negative 16. You'll get a number there, and we can always math frac that and say, all right, we are at 1/4. All right, so that works out to be 1/4. Notice the negative divided by a negative, so that is a positive 1/4 x. Okay? Now, this question doesn't ask that, but just realize that this number here is your slope, and that's because it's next to the x. This number is your y-intercept because it's the one without the x next to it. All right, let's try another one of these. Write the equation of the line 3y minus 12 equals 9x in slope-intercept form. So again, that just means we're getting the y by itself. So we can start by getting rid of this minus 12, so that's a plus 12 and a plus 12. These will cancel out. We'll have 3y equals 9x plus 12. Divide everything by 3 and end up with y equals 3x plus 4. And again, this one would be our slope because it's next to the x. This one would be our y-intercept. All right. So now that we've practiced getting the y by itself, let's actually apply that to a graphing problem. So this one says graph 5x minus 10y equals negative 30 on the axes below. So before we can do that, we need to get the y by itself. So we have to get rid of this 5x, and we have to get rid of this negative 10. So we'll start by subtracting 5x from both sides. We'll cancel out right here, and we'll get negative 10y equals negative 30 minus 5x. Divide everything by negative 10. Those will cancel out. And we get y equals negative divided by a negative is going to become a positive 3. And then again, a negative divided by a negative here. If you do negative 5 divided by negative 10, you get a positive 0.5, which will math frac back to 1/2. So this is 3 plus 1/2 x. Now, once the y is by itself, you have two choices. You can either put this into your y equals. So you could go to your calculator here, put it into y equals, and type in 3 plus 1/2 x. You could bring up the table, and then you would have to graph, usually I say at least 4 points. Remember, the x is your left to right. Your y is the up and down. So this one right here would be like back 4 to the left 4 and then up 1. The other way to do it is using your slope and your y-intercept. So the slope is how you move, and in our case it's 1/2, which means up 1 and to the right 2. The y-intercept is where you start, and in our case we're starting at positive 3. So to actually graph that, we would start at positive 3, which is right there, and then we would go up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, or we could go down 1, back 2, down 1, back 2, down 1, back 2. You can always do the exact opposite, right? So that's going to give us a whole bunch of points. We're going to connect those points. Okay, so we connected the points. I'm drawing arrows on both sides to show that it keeps going. And then I am going to label my line. So this is 5x minus 10y equals negative 30. So I'm throwing that label on there just to complete the graph. Okay, let's take a look at the back. Solve the system of equations graphically. Okay, so we've got 2 here that we're going to graph, and we're looking for the intersection point. Now this first one, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, I got to get the y by itself. The y is already by itself. They just wrote it on the other side. So if I rewrite this over here, y equals 3x minus 4, I don't actually have any extra work to do on that one. I can either put it right into my calculator, so go to the y equals and type in 3x minus 4, and bring up my table, and then again I would just pick 4 points to graph, you know, maybe 0, negative 4, 1, negative 1, 2, 2, 3, 5, or I can do the slope and the y-intercept. So right there is my slope, because it's next to the x. So if I want to show that as a fraction, it would just be 3 over 1, which means I'm going up 3 and to the right 1. Slope is always rise over run. So the top number is your up and down, the bottom number is your left to right. And then this one right here is my y-intercept. That's a negative 4, and that's where I'm going to start my graph. So the y-intercept is where I start, the slope again is how I move. So I would start down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I would go up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1, and just keep going there. I could also go down 3 and back 1, down 3 and back 1. But either way, I'm going to get a whole bunch of points. I'm going to connect those points. Alright, I'm going to draw my arrows on both sides, and I'm going to put my label up top off the graph. And the reason I'm doing that, the reason I'm putting it up here is because I still have another line to graph on here. So I don't want to put it right in the middle and then have it get in the way of my second line. Okay. So the second one, I am going to have some work to do here, because this one, the y is clearly not by itself. So let's rewrite it down here. 6y minus 8x equals negative 4. Alright, I'm going to add 8x to both sides. I'm going to get 6y equals negative 4 plus 8x. I'm going to divide everything by 6. And when I do that, you're going to see I get a whole bunch of decimals. So like negative 4 divided by 6, if I math frac that, is negative 2/3, and then the same thing happens if I do 8 divided by 6. Alright, 8 divided by 6, and then if I math frac that, is going to be 4/3. So both of these are giving me fractions. One is giving me negative 2/3, the other one is giving me positive 4/3. So I have y equals negative 2/3 plus 4/3 x. Now if we look at this one here, you're going to see that the y-intercept is not an integer. Alright, it's a fraction here. Whenever you end up with a fraction in your y-intercept, you're probably not going to want to use the slope-intercept method, because it's hard to say where exactly negative 2/3 is. So it's hard to say, like, is negative 2/3 there? Is it there? Is it there? I mean, it's hard to be exact, so it's hard to use that method because you don't really know where to start. Instead, we're going to make a table for this one. So I'm going to make an x, y table. I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to type in negative 2/3 plus 4/3 x. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the ones that have decimals. So I'm going to say, all right, -4, -6. And then I'm going to skip these next two and do -1, -2. Then I'm going to skip a bunch and do 2, 2, and then also 5, 6. Okay, so I've got my points there. Remember, the x is your left to right, the y is your up and down. So -4, -6, which was one of my points, -4, -6 would be back 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. -1, -2 is what I have up next. That would be back 1 and down 2. +2, +2 would be over 2 and up 2, and then +5, +6, which is my last point here, is going to be over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right, I'm going to connect those points. I'm going to draw my arrows. I'm going to throw a label on here. So this one was 6y minus 8x equals -4. And what you're seeing is that my two lines intersect. That intersection point is the solution to the system of equations. So to get full credit on one of these, I actually have to state where those two lines are intersecting. So based on my graph here, all right, I'm going to write my solution. Remember, when you write a solution, the x comes first and the y comes second. So my x is over 1, 2, and my y is up also 1, 2. So this one's kind of easy. It's sort of impossible to goof up because it's the same number. It's 2, 2. Okay? That's it for this homework. I hope this was helpful, and have a good day.